Welcome back to the Distressed Princess. I'm Rhonda. Today is Try It Tuesday, and I love Try It Tuesday because you get inspired by other creators and make some of the things that they do. So here are some of the projects that I'm working on today. The links to the original creators will be in my description box below, along with the playlist so you can see all the Try It Tuesday fun. The first DIY is this neat spoon decoration, and I got this idea from Julie's Designs and Signs. She's one of my favorite YouTubers. I searched in my shed for an old sign that I could repurpose, and I found this block of wood decoration, and I also thrifted these antique aluminum spoons. This decoration originally came from a store called Burke's, but they may have things like this at TJ Maxx or Ross, or even use just a spare old piece of wood you have. The first thing I did was take the spoons off of the ring that they usually come on, and I used a pair of needle nose pliers to pry that ring apart so the spoons would come off. They're going to go on the sign just like this, and Julie hot glued hers, and you could absolutely hot glue yours too, but in case I ever wanted to use this for a actual spoon hanger and I wanted to use the spoons, I'm going to use these cup hooks. Next, I painted over the words of the sign with white chalk paint. It took about 3 coats. I used my hair dryer to dry up the chalk paint so it got a little antique-y crackle to it. Then I realized I had a decision to make. The spoons could go like this on the board, or I could turn the board the other way around where the fatter trim at the bottom would be at the top and hang it the other way. And ultimately I decided I liked the second way better. I'm going to pre-drill some holes for the cup hooks to go into. So I used a black marker to mark where I'll be drilling holes. I used the tiniest drill bit that I had that would match the little screw on the cup hooks, and I didn't drill all the way through. I just drilled a little bit so that the cup hooks could have a good start and I could screw them in the rest of the way with my fingers. Now my cup hooks were gold or brass, so I wanted to paint them a color that would match more with my art piece. So I'm painting them with some pewter gray. While my hooks were drying, I decided to add some sawtooth hangers to the back of the project. So if I wanted to hang it on the wall, it could hang, or this block is chunky enough it can stand up on its own. Then I flipped her back over, my hooks were dry, and I added the hooks to my pre-drilled holes and hung the spoons. The next DIY is also from Julie's Designs and Signs. Actually, the first 3 are, so just go ahead and tell you. I'm going to make those beautiful carrots, and she used a canvas drop cloth, which perfect, but I have these kind of canvasy, burlappy, some sort of mixture in between placemats that I want to get used up. I have 2 of them. And so what she did was she doubled up her material, and then she just freehand cut some carrot shapes. So that's what I'm going to do. She said, and I agree, that it's better to just freehand cut these so they're not all exactly identical the same, because it makes it more farmhouse. So here are my 3 carrot shapes, and the next step is to hot glue them together. So you peel back the first layer of the material that you cut and just run a line of hot glue around the edge, but not all the way over to the edge, because you want just a little bit left over for a shaggy frayed effect at the end. And leave about an inch at least at the top for your greenery to hang out of. And of course, leave the end open so that you can stuff it. Now, Julie used an IOD stamp to embellish her carrots. She did numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on each carrot, but I don't have numbers, so I decided I would use some other stamps that I have, and it worked just the same way. I just put the black stamping ink onto the stamps and stamped them onto the carrots in place of where her numbers are. Next, stuff your carrots with cotton and make sure that you get all the way down to the little tippy tip of the bottom. Now you'll need some little greenery sprigs, just enough to make it look like a little carrot top poking out of the bottom of your little carrot there. So just grab up some of them and hot glue them inside your little burlap carrot. Then use some jute string to tie up the end and wrap it around a few times and make a pretty little bow. The last step is to pull out some threads around the edges of your carrot. Actually, Julie didn't do this, but I wanted to, so it's optional, I guess. But I pulled out some of the threads along the edges of my material and cut off the long pieces, and my carrots were done. The next DIY is the pretty cast iron skillet from Julie's Designs and Signs. Julie's skillet, I'm sure, was a vintage one. It had rust on it, was old and everything. And I already have this teeny tiny little Pioneer Woman skillet that's not big enough to cook anything in. So I decided I would try to make it look old and rusty. And I also wanted to cover up or fill in that Pioneer Woman writing there on the bottom. So I'm using some Dollar Tree spackle and I'm smearing it all over the bottom and filling in those words. And I'm not going in any certain direction. I'm kind of doing it haphazardly because I'm trying to make this look like, I don't know, how I thought rust would be, I guess. But you can totally skip all of this step if you already have an old rusty pan that you can use. After the spackle was dry, I came in with some sandpaper and I lightly sanded pretty much just in the middle because I know that later on that's where I'm going to try to put a decal or a IOD transfer. So I'm sanding down just a little bit in the middle to make a smooth spot, but the rest of it I pretty much leave rough. Now I'm going to paint back over that spackle with some chalkboard paint. This was the perfect match to cast iron that I could think of. It worked great. And so I just painted this black chalk paint all over where I had put the spackle. I did not paint the inside of the skillet. Not that I'm ever going to actually use the skillet for cooking anymore anyway. I never did. I don't think I ever cooked anything with this one. It was just too small. But anyhow, I digress. Paint if you need to do this step, or if you're trying to get this effect like I am, go for the chalkboard paint. And this is how it was looking so far, and I'm loving this, using the spackle to make that bottom look all rough and old. Now we just need to make some rust, and I'm using cinnamon to do that. Cinnamon and Mod Podge. In this jar that you'll see me get my Mod Podge out of, this is DIY Mod Podge, by the way. It's only white school glue and water, and it's just watered down school glue to a Mod Podge consistency. It saves me so much money, so give that a try if you want to save some more money on your crafting. But anyway, I applied the Mod Podge into the areas of the skillet that I wanted it to look rusty. I did it heavier around the edges. I left the middle pretty much alone because that's where a IOD transfer is going to go, and so I concentrated most of the rust around the edges. And the way you do that is just sprinkle it on. You can use your fingers. I did that some. And then I decided to go back to using the brush so I get a stipply. I kind of stippled it and it turns out great. And I ran that rust along up the handle some and around on the edges, on the sides, and just play around. This is so much fun making this rust. You will love it. After the rust has dried, now you can apply any kind of a decal or a transfer. I'm using an Iron Orchid Design transfer. I already had the one picked out that I wanted to use, flipped back to the back of this book, and there it is, that bunch of pretty little roses, just like the one on the front page, only smaller to fit this skillet. If you've never used an IOD transfer before, you are in for a treat when you get your hands on one. They are so much fun and you'll want to put them on everything. They're very, very simple, so all you have to do is cut out the design that you want to use, peel off the white backing, apply it to your project, and if you feel the need to, use a piece of masking tape or painter's tape to tape it down on one side to keep it from moving around. I've never really had that issue before, but just to be on the safe side, it doesn't hurt. Then use the tool that comes with every IOD transfer set and rub the transfer onto your project. And it comes off really, really easily, and you can kind of see as you go along the transfer going onto the project. Then slowly peel the plastic back. I don't peel it completely off in case I need to put it back down and do a little bit more rubbing in case something didn't transfer. And then when you're happy with that, then peel it all the way off and you have your beautiful reveal. And the last step is to seal your work with some clear sealer. The next DIY is a hack I've been wanting to try on how to decoupage with scrapbook paper. It comes from Deirdre over at Our Upcycled Life. Now I'll go ahead and let you know that it took me a few tries to get this right, but I'm going to show you my mistakes so that you know what not to do and you'll know how to do it right in the end. So the first thing I did was pick out my scrapbook paper, and that is the very first mistake that I make. The scrapbook paper that I picked out is a very thick scrapbook paper that comes in a book. So avoid that and use single sheets of scrapbook paper or thinner scrapbook paper, and you won't have the problems that I run into. So what I've been doing here is cutting down the scrapbook paper to the size of printer paper so that I can run it through my printer and put a design on it. Also, you'll see that I printed two sets of designs. The first one I printed, I had a different font. It didn't really show up due to the print on the scrapbook paper, so I did this other one that shows up a little bit better. I sized it all to go on this old wood sign that I'm going to repurpose, and we're going to teach ourselves how to do this using Deirdre's advice. So I'm cutting the scrapbook paper down so that it will fit onto my sign, and then I go on to the next step. And the next step is to turn your scrapbook paper design upside down and then use some clear packing tape to put on the back. So you're going to do this sort of in layers. It took about 3 pieces, I think, to cover this, and you want to overlap them just a tiny, tiny little bit. Then use a scraper or a credit card or something to burnish that packing tape down onto the scrapbook paper. And the whole idea of this is when you peel that packing tape back off, it's going to take a layer of that paper with it, making the paper much thinner. But see here, it didn't quite work, so I put it back down. I burnished it some more. I'm thinking, well, maybe I didn't press hard enough, and so I do it all again and peel it up, and a little on the corner, but no, still not really coming off. And that is because of the paper that I'm using. I'm convinced of it. So I scrapped this piece and I printed my design on another piece of scrapbook paper that I had that started out thinner. So here's what I'm talking about. That piece of paper came out of a book. So now I'm going to my paper stash and I'm going to pick out one that's not in a book, that's just a single sheet that I bought for like $1 at Hobby Lobby, and it is much thinner to start with. So I did it all over again on this new piece of paper. I put my packing tape down, I burnished it, and now watch, when you peel that packing tape off, a layer of the paper goes with it, and that's exactly what you want. And that's what Deidre is trying to show us. So take a lesson from me and use thinner paper to start. Now that we have our paper that we can decoupage with, I'm going to paint my sign so that we can get on with the DIY. You can see that it's going to take a couple of coats to cover my words, but on the other sides I left it kind of rustic and just not completely covered on purpose for a farmhouse look. Now this is another trick that Deidre talks about. This is printed on an inkjet printer. So to keep your ink from running, use hairspray on it so that it seals it in, and when you use your Mod Podge, your black ink doesn't go running everywhere. Deidre herself uses a LaserJet printer, and if you have a LaserJet printer, you shouldn't have to do this. And here's a step that I've never done before, but Deidre says to wet the back of your scrapbook paper. So I don't know if that helps it to stick better onto your project or really what it does, but my project turned out great in the end, so I suggest doing it. Now put a layer of Mod Podge onto your wood block or your sign, whatever you're using. And again, this is my homemade DIY Mod Podge. Now put your design onto the block. And another Deidre tip is to use a plastic paper protector and place that on top while you smooth out your design, and that gets all of the air bubbles and wrinkles out. This came out absolutely flawless. Now seal it up with another layer of Mod Podge. After the Mod Podge has dried, the last step is to use a sanding block to sand off the excess paper, and you can distress the edges, which I do. I do heavier distressing on the corners and the edges of the block, and this looks like it was just made this way. It doesn't look like a DIY at all. It looks like it was bought, and I absolutely love it, and so happy I found Deidre to show me how to do this. Now let's take a look back at all our DIYs today. The link to the playlist is down in my description box below so that you can see what everyone else decided to try for this Try It Tuesday. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.